adding people on Facebook. I'm here to talk about social entrepreneurship and the developing world. Much in the similar way that the second speaker's grandmother desired that everybody has clean water in the world. And it was with our last violinist talking about sort of nonverbal communication, like how can you sort of receive this expressatory act of music. My narrative is sort of a mix of both of those, so I hope to cover a little bit of that. So again, TOHL stood for Tubing Operations for Humanitarian Logistics, but when folks ask, are you starting a business, and you try to say 25 syllables, sort of gets lame. So we shortened it to TOHL. It rolls off the tongue a little bit easier. And we're an innovative pipeline installation company. So if you could go to the next slide. So I have some numbers here for you all today. Relates to water, and I'm trying to include the audience in this. So if anybody can answer to me what the first two numbers mean, that would be wonderful. Come on, we're at Georgia Tech. You can answer your question. Anybody? Close. So to answer the question, the first one is 1.2 billion. That's the amount of people in the world that have physical scarcity to water, which basically means they might be walking 5 kilometers to get to their nearest well to get water, even if that be clean. 1.6 billion is economic scarcity, which is defined by the UN, one of the UN's many groups, as having lack of actual infrastructure to get water. So all of this together, it's a big problem. And you can see it as a problem, but you can also see it as a opportunity to create a solution. So when he was talking about Chile, one second, back to the last one. When he was talking about Chile, I actually took a gap year in between undergrad and graduate school here at Tech. If any of you are from Tech, which I bet many of you are, you're aware of CCF on campus, Campus Christian Fellowship. They asked me to be a missionary at one of their sister organizations in Chile. And at first I said no, because I was like dead on set to finish grad school. But I actually stepped back and decided, yes, I'm going to take this year of service to follow my faith, but also to learn from the people in Chile as well. So when I got down there, as a rite of passage in the Christian faith, one of the acts is baptism. I got to baptize 2 students. And one of the verses I was reading, which I didn't know was going to be related to my future life later on that year, was John 4:14. So I'm sharing this in a non-evangelistic sense. Just please listen to me. But whoever drinks of the water that I give him will never thirst again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up into eternal life. So Christ said this 2,000 years ago, and it had influence in me at that moment because in a sense it talks about deliverance, moving something from point A to point B. At the same time, it talks about a spring, which is the nerdy part of a Georgia Tech student, makes you sort of like logically dig into some of this text and say, what's a spring? It's a fissure that sort of opens up in the earth that allows water to flow forth. In that sense, a lot of people have springs near their home. A lot of people have access to water, but sometimes that water is contaminated, sometimes it's dirty, sometimes it's lacking to be able to get from that deliverance, in this case, point A to point B. So to wind into that narrative, I got a call in October of 2011, while I was still a missionary, of a student that I had only met twice here on campus, and he's like, do you want to change the world? And you don't usually get those phone calls, and so when you get those phone calls, you should say yes, because it might change your life. In this case, he was thinking of, he was working at a Schlumberger at the moment, and was understanding how to use coiled tubing, in this case, to deliver petrol, oil, across long distances. He had worked there previously as a co-op as well during the Haiti earthquake in January 10th of 2010. And basically, while he was sitting on an oil rig, said, how can I use my knowledge to move water from point A to point B that I currently have in the oil field? This charge sort of started going on paper as like a mobilely deployed pipeline system. And usually when you hear pipeline, you might think of something that like ravishes through the forest that's very unsustainable. We wanted to sort of flip that paradigm on its side and create a solution. So that's the number one, is that everybody lives on one Earth, and we all need to find solutions to common problems. In this case, our problem was water. Next slide. And so because of climate change created through droughts, floods, and other natural disasters that are difficult to plan for, we have a common need. In this case, in droughts, climate change, you have large amounts of people moving from point A to point B. But most of the times, their physical needs might not move with them. So if they're living maybe near a stream, or they need to be living near a stream, water cannot be adequately diverted to their communities. And so we needed to come up with a cost-effective solution of basically deploying pipeline to them. And so I want to show you a little quick video on YouTube of what we created. And this is Ben Cohen. He's my partner in Chile. He's still down in Chile. That's good. The inspirational music makes it better. And if even if you see right there, the Georgian in me makes me laugh that we actually used duct tape in this test. It was a minimum viable product, so at its best, we were using the cheapest and skinniest tube that we could find. We found a welder in a really not so good neighborhood in Santiago to do the actual spooling design, and the helicopter company offered its time for free to us. And so the situation sort of propagated on itself, where we had an idea on paper that we had applied for funding from Startup Chile. Startup Chile is an incubation firm that's ran by the Chilean government. In very Georgia Tech fashion, we applied with 15 seconds left on the deadline clock, so it's sort of like turning in that final paper on T-Square at midnight. It was sort of the same feeling. We heard back a month later that we won $40,000 US to come down to Chile and to innovate, and they weren't taking any percentage out of the company. So for those that start companies, if somebody's giving you money without taking a percentage, that's awesome. And so we needed something that could be quickly installed, easily removed, and non-environmentally destructive. So this case you see right here, although you saw it like over a 30-second chunk, it took about 8.5 minutes, but in its, I guess, primal state, this is the first time we ever did it that wasn't in like an Atari-style 3D application on your computer. We did this in a little under 9 minutes. It was 8.5 minutes, and a kilometer, so like 3 football fields and sides. For us, it was impressive because it didn't kink. It worked very well. And we said, well, we have something that's working for us. We're not only being able to transport water from point A to point B, but we've made partnerships in the Chilean sphere with Chilean-based technology that can actually filter this water when it gets to a community. You can go to the next slide. And so, again, effective, fast, and flexible. This tubing, for this case, was 1 inch outside diameter. We had 1.5 kilometers on there just in case we wanted to carry it a little bit farther down the stream. The interesting part is Chile, there are areas that have physical scarcity of water. Their government has a policy put in place, though, that allows them to basically mandate that everybody gets water in the country. It's a wonderful policy to have, but oftentimes stuff like that happens in a very inefficient way. Some of these communities are paying $8,000 a month for 40 families to get water. It's beautiful in the one sense that they're getting water, but at the same time the municipality is paying over $100,000 a year to get that to them. And so with our solution, which in many of these cases cost about the same price as a year of the deployment of water trucks, our tubing system will last for 20 to 25 years. And that includes cost of local labor to manage the security of the system and everything like that. Next slide. So for us, when we entered into this sphere, to talk a little bit on the social entrepreneurship side, we're trying to meet the social need of physical water scarcity, or liquid scarcity in this case. And so you have this thing in your mind of you're responding to this call from Bill Clinton on the BBC to go out and create a technology to solve the problems that happened in Haiti. And by the way, like 8,000 people died in a town called Jacmel that's right probably 25 kilometers south of the airport just because they didn't have access to water that was sitting there at the airport. And so that was like sort of our marching call, but at the same time you can't build a business model around waiting for an earthquake. Not only is it sadistic to sort of sit there and hope for one, but at the same time there's many other markets that you could be testing your technology in as well. Chile was great for us in this case that we could not only meet the needs of rural communities that were currently getting supplied by water trucks, but at the same time, the mining industry has large needs of moving amounts of water from point A to point B. So this thing that was just on paper as an idea in March of 2011, March of 2012, or 2012, we took it to this minimum viable product stage that you saw. And then actually, when we showed that to a mining company in northern Chile, they actually agreed to do a 15-kilometer installation. It's truck-based, but at the same time, we're innovating on a lot of the processes that they currently use to deploy tube lines in this market. And so we're not only making a revenue, but we're also being able to make a difference in industry and the humanitarian sector. Next slide. So yeah, again, that's what I'm just sort of talking about right now is being able to get to that need of reaching the need of families, but also reaching the need of industry. In this case, we had 4 students. I mean, I'm still a student here at Georgia Tech that saw this need, but none of us were sort of in the box that Georgia Tech puts us in. I mean, like, ultimately, this is a mechanical engineering problem if you're a tech student. None of us were mechanical engineers. I'm policy, the other guy was biochem, the other was chemical engineering and economics, and the other one was a civil. And so none of us that fit into this box of solving this problem were trying to solve this problem. So for me, what I learned is that this education process that we're going through right now as young adults sometimes can come back on you and push you to a situation that you actually have to learn more. For me, I learned fluid dynamics, and if you ever told that to a public policy student, you're like, ugh, I mean, it just sounds like something nasty that you don't want to learn. But you learn it when you know that you have 40 families that are going to be able to get clean water as a output. Next slide. So this is the team. Currently, we have business advisors in Chile, and we're globally based. I guess a little bit about the entrepreneurial process. For me, we had to deal with rejection in this case. The rejection came from none other than Georgia Tech at the beginning. We applied for the Inventure Prize and were rejected because they said the idea wouldn't work, and in a nutshell. And so hearing that from a professor, from individuals in the university, it sort of makes you think, well, you want to go out and prove them wrong, but at the same time, maybe I should listen to them. Well, going out to prove it was actually the marching charge that we took forth from that. So if dealing with rejection happens a lot in an entrepreneurial process or an innovative process, even in the classroom. Create and innovate. To me, it's a cycle that is iterative. So you're constantly going through this stage of learning, of saying maybe this material will work or maybe this process will work. I think that's a process that can apply not only to the engineering field but across life in a lot of ways. Share it. So in this case, it has a humanitarian end in it, but it's not necessarily like an evil to make profit. So in this case, social entrepreneurship means you can meet the needs of somebody, cut down the costs that they're currently paying to meet those needs, and as well as make a profit that you can reinvest into your products as a company. And repeat this process over. So it's sort of like a recipe for me. Again, it's education with a purpose. I never knew I would learn fluid dynamics as a public policy major here at Tech. But when you see the impact that a new form of education or stepping outside of that box will give to you, I encourage you to step outside of the box. And that's my speech, so I appreciate it. Thank you.